If you look at the standings as things finished at the top of the table, remember just Napoli and Inter have completed their fixtures ahead of this weekend. The rest of the Italian teams will compete. However, you got to say well done to Napoli. They have won the title by scoring only 59 goals. Michael Lahoud, congratulations to Napoli. It wasn't necessarily the most pleasing on the eye season, unless you're a Scottish fan and a big fan of McTominay, but Napoli somehow found a way to get the job done. How did they get it done?
Look, I've always been a believer that this Napoli side, yes, we can talk about what they did when they won the Scudetto a couple seasons ago. Yes, Kvaratskhelia, Victor Osimhen, but the ingredient for success, Ian, was goals from midfield. You got to take the heat off your leading goal scorer and your striker at the time in Romelu Lukaku. But now you have a more dynamic team, a more goal-scoring team, and a team that's bought in, more discipline. But Antonio Conte is a secret sauce.
Yeah, he's done a fabulous job, but so is this guy right here. Scott McTominay, outstanding, and also nominated and therefore awarded the MVP of Serie A this campaign. Would you agree with that decision to give him the MVP? Obviously very impactful for what he did do this season in a Napoli jersey, especially after coming off the back of disappointment at Manchester United. He's pretty much turned the season around and also scored some incredibly popular goals for Napoli this season.
He's turned his career around, right? Yeah. This was a guy that was outcast, seen as an outcast from Old Trafford, and had question marks about how he would do. He came in with the right manager at the right time. Going down the stretch where the MVP conversation really came under his grasp, you go down the stretch, you look at the goal-scoring form. This Napoli side don't win the Scudetto without Scott McTominay. I mean, we see it, the 12 goals on the season. I mean, the guy's a force to be reckoned with, but this is a guy that willed his team forward.
I mentioned vital goals. Okay, in addition to be obviously nominated at MVP, he scored the most goals in 0-0 situations. 8 goals he has scored to give Napoli the lead. What do you think it has been for, if we just focus on Scott McTominay and the season he has had, obviously helping Napoli to Scudetto, you have to say there's been something that Conte has done to McTominay, to that locker room, to maybe get the best out of his players. So what has he done to Scott McTominay?
I never thought Scott McTominay was a defensive midfielder. You remember watching him at Manchester United with Erik ten Hag, tried to play him deeper, and then he got something out of him last season when he was playing further forward. With Scotland, where does he play? Closer to the goal. Where Antonio Conte got it right is he's got power in his legs. And there's not many Serie A midfielders, when you think of the top teams, that can cope with the mobility from midfield. He's got a knack for scoring goals and big goals. Even going back to last season, the FA Cup run-up. Manchester United, he scores against Coventry. He scores against Liverpool, right? Everyone remembers some of the goals that were scored, but he was such a catalyst in the FA Cup final win. And this man right here, Antonio Conte, what he's been able to do, restore confidence in him and so many players, especially in midfield, it's incredible.
5 titles as a player in Serie A, now 5 titles as a manager in Serie A. I mean, he took on this job. It's an opportunity for him to obviously get back involved in Italian football. Many people thought he was crazy going to this Napoli side. He was dealt some very difficult cards. Obviously, Osimhen deciding to leave and go play his football elsewhere on loan in Turkey. And then you lose Kvaratskhelia, your most important player in the mid-season, and yet he still managed to win an Italian title. What did he do right here, Conte, that impressed you to manage to get him over the line?
I think it's a blend of what makes Italian football great, right? The defensive side of things, Napoli, they were defensive stalwarts this season, but I thought he got it right in terms of his recruitment. Some of the players that he brought in that have so much to prove. We saw him do this at Chelsea when he came in, and he's got a knack, not just for winning Scudettos. You look at what he's done to each club. You go from Juventus, they were 7th before he got there, took him to the summit. You go to Chelsea, they were 10th. This Napoli side, yet again, 10th. This guy is not just a serial winner. This guy is a culture and trend setter. He wins everywhere he goes, and he gets buy-in from everyone.
Yeah, he just knows how to get it done, right? He's just that type of manager who goes to a football club and tries to make an impact. 59 goals scored, 27 goals against. There's been a number of players. Big Rom, obviously 14 goals domestically. It's the best return he's had at a domestic season since 21 when he was playing for Inter. But we've got to give some love to Anguissa as well in midfield. There's been a number of players who have really stood out. Not many people will talk about Anguissa and the job that he did do because of McTominay in that midfield area, but he was immense this season.
Yeah, the thing I've always loved about Zambo Anguissa, when you watch him play for Cameroon, he gets further forward and he gets you goals. Last season, he was playing way too far back and he looked uncomfortable. This is a guy that's made to have an impact in the final third, and with so much attention paid to Romelu Lukaku, there's spaces spaces and running spaces for midfielders to get in. And this guy, he has gotten more consistent in his finishing product. His end product's actually gotten better. He's had his best goal scoring season of his career this season under Conte. And this is a guy that right now, we got to start talking about him, one of the best midfielders in Serie A. He's up there.
It'll be interesting to see if they can keep a hold of him. Now, with a 20-man division, no team has ever come back from finishing the previous season in 10th place and won Scudetto, the league title, the next season. Napoli just did do that one. What does that tell us about the race that we had in Italian football this year? Inter had their opportunity, let it throw away. There wasn't many challenges or true challenges to Napoli this season.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations to Napoli and what they're able to do. This is another historical landmark for them and another historical landmark in Italian football. This is one of the iconic clubs in football heritage in Italy. But when you look at the rest of the landscape, Ian, there was inconsistency. There were clubs that didn't know how to compete on multiple fronts. You think of Atalanta. They were right there for much of the season, about 2/3 of the way, and then Gasperini struck. The incident with Ademola Lookman, that really derailed their title credentials. You think of Milan. I mean, disaster of a season. They benefited from this being a poor season in terms of Serie A sides that we're usually talking about, but they did the job. They got it done when it mattered most down the stretch.
Real quickly, do they keep a hold of Antonio Conte, or does he decide to move on to a new opportunity that's certainly been rumoured about recently in the media?
Look, Antonio Conte, he's going to say ciao and arrivederci, he gone.
Ciao for now. Antonio Conte lifts yet again another Scudetto. That is 5 times now as a manager. Congratulations to all you Napoli fans out there. We can't always talk about the champions and how they got the job done. We also have to talk about Inter and how on earth they managed to allow this to slip away. They must be desperately disappointed, Michael Lahoud, but tell me how on earth this happened.
Yeah, look, this was an Inter side that I think many of us outside of Marco Messina, who he's feeling like the champion. He's feeling like a champion like Antonio Conte right now. Maybe just underneath that level of happiness. But this was a side that I think all of us expected to run away with the league, right? Because of how good they were last season, because how good they've been in the last couple seasons. On paper, they're the best side, most talent, and they re-upped with the likes of Marcus Thuram from last season and into this season. They had all the pieces, Mediterranean coming in, but some of their new signings did not hit. And outside of the front two, you got to go with where the rest of the goals are coming from, Ian, right? You think of Hakan Çalhanoğlu, didn't score as many goals, but still impactful. But when you go outside of that, Mediterranean missing in action. Joaquin Correa finally gets his second goal of the season. Arnautovic didn't score as many goals as he scored last season. That is not going to cut it. You have to score goals to win football matches and then ultimately win titles.
Once again, we got a goal from De Vrij, another defender. In Serie A this season, 24 goals have been scored by defenders, which is the most in Europe's top 5 leagues. The next team for defensive goals came from Frankfurt, who had 14. That is an immense number, and it tells you there was a lot of quality from the defensive side of the game. But when you consider that the attackers only scored 33 goals, the problem's clearly evident there. This team might need a reshuffle for next season to be able to compete once again at the top of the table.
Yeah, look, Joaquin Correa, I've watched him play throughout his career. I watched him when he was at Marseille. He ain't the guy. He's not the answer, right? He's on his last sort of legs. And I was really worried when I saw Simone Inzaghi down the stretch. It was almost like, okay, we know we have the UEFA Champions League, but you still got to compete on multiple fronts. I started questioning what was the mentality? How much stock did they put on the Scudetto title? And I think once Napoli gave them a little bit of window, they looked like they were back into it. But I'm going to show you another stat, Ian Joy. Outside of not scoring goals, this was an Inter side that last season didn't give you a sniff. As soon as they went up 1-0, they weren't giving you anything. This season, they conceded 12 goals in the final 10 minutes plus of football matches, which is the most in Serie A this season. You think of the times they've been up in winning positions 30 times. 6 times ended in a draw. Those 6 points or those 6 matches that they dropped, that ultimately cost them. You think of the last match coming into the penultimate match, they should have had that. But then Lazio, the likes of Parma, you can go through. They've just thrown matches away late on.
10-goal difference from last season compared to this season with what they had scored. 79 goals they have scored this season. They had 89 goals as they ran champions of Italy last season. They led through match day 26-33. Then they lost it. They obviously lost at home to Roma. They lost at Bologna. And all of a sudden it was out of their hands. 1 month ago today, they were still involved in all three competitions. They had the Milan game, obviously, to look forward to in Coppa Italia. They had the Barcelona game to look forward to in the Champions League. And all of a sudden, they find themselves out. How far away were they, though? Because it's not all been bad. Even though they've not been at their best, there's still been a ton of positives that you would imagine Inzaghi will build off now going into that Champions League final.
Yeah, Simone Inzaghi will think what might have been if he had a healthy Lautaro Martinez. Knowing what he knows about the lack of quality that he doesn't have anymore, a couple seasons ago, we were lauding this Inter side for the lack of quality in the final third. Yeah. That's a big part of how he sets his team up. That's a big part of how they can compete on multiple fronts. There's a lack of quality in his team, I would say, in a couple of different positions, but there's no replacement for Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Christian Aslani isn't the same quality, anywhere near to that, right? But I think that this is a side that I question the level of focus that they had. So much focus being put on the Champions League to get back and win that coveted trophy that they lost out on. I think the likes of Jan Bisek, not the same player that he was. Jan Bisek has given up so many goals this season, and too many of those players have had bad moments at the wrong time, I think, for Inter.
Is it a bad thing, though, for Inter to be focusing on the Champions League? I mean, this is an exclusive trophy that so few ever get to put their hands on. Obviously, Inter very recently in the final had an opportunity to do so. But obviously, you would imagine that there would be some sort of consideration to try and save your players, especially with an aging team, for those big games. Did they prioritise, in your opinion, the Champions League over winning an Italian league and winning Coppa Italia?
I mean, you see in the last couple matches, you see in this match, you only have Hakan Çalhanoğlu and not many players that are on the sideline, on the bench, waiting for the biggest match of the season now, which is the UEFA Champions League. This is a side that, after winning title number 20, I mean, that's a feat. They beat Milan to that number, which is an incredible feat last season. The next level for them to really reassert themselves as a dominant world footballing power in Europe is to get that Champions League. Yeah. They were so close against Manchester City, and I think this is a group of players. It's haunted them, and that you win the Champions League, you right the wrongs of everything that's happened this season. You lose now, and walk away with 0 trophies, and the fact that your rivals beat you in the ways they did in Milan?
Yeah, it was an embarrassment.
That's a failure of a season.
Okay, so how do they get the job done? Obviously, looking forward to that game against Paris Saint-Germain. Now, very quickly, they have to turn the page and look forward to the Champions League, because this is the elite competition. I'm talking about the King's Cup here. The Champions League, if you win that, all is pretty much forgotten. So if you look at the starting 11, you could tell that maybe Inzaghi is already preparing for that PSG game. So tell me how on earth they get that job done against a very dangerous, electrifying, energetic, speedy Paris Saint-Germain side who score a ton of goals.
Yeah, this is a PSG side that they literally look like they cannot be stopped in terms of the mentality, in terms of their youth. But the one thing that's a strength for Inter and is a weakness for PSG, set pieces. They're one of the best set piece sides in Europe this season, and PSG, Gigi Donnarumma, we've seen him wear his Superman cape, but if he doesn't show up with the right focus, if that back line, which is undersized, to Inter, send the trees, send the ball, and notch in on a set-piece goal, then do what you did against Barcelona, defend for your lives.